Hi everyone, Helen Blunden here at Activate Learn on Twitter. It is time for another book review, and this time round it is a very old book that was written in 1790, but the particular publication I have was published in 1961, and it is The Mutiny onboard HMS Bounty by William Bligh. William Bligh, the man himself, the captain of HMS Bounty. Now, as I mentioned, this book was published in 1961, and recently I bought it from the City Basement Books in Melbourne, which if you haven't been to this place, you should visit it. You go down into the basement and you are met with a whole heap of books, a maze of bookshelves, and you can spend hours in there, and it has that old musty book smell everywhere, as this one does. Now, this one has some marginalia in it, and you can see it, and here it says, "To Ellen from Dad for doing so well at school, 1967. So he was gifted this book before I was even born. So there you go. So what is this book about? It says it's a voyage to the South Sea undertaken by command of His Majesty for the purpose of conveying breadfruit of the breadfruit tree to the West Indies in His Majesty's ship, the Bounty, commanded by Lieutenant William Bligh, and an account of the mutiny on board HMS Bounty and the subsequent voyage of part of the crew in the ship's boat from Tofoa, one of the Friendly Islands, to Timor, a Dutch settlement in the East Indies." Don't you love it? I love how they set the outline of the book. What I also like was in each chapter, and I don't know why they don't do this in books nowadays, is there's a little synopsis at the beginning of the chapter that you could basically read, and it preempts you what the chapter is about. So this one is the ship's cable cut in the night, the coolness with the chiefs on that account, a visit to an old lady, disturbance at Hiva, Tina's hospitality, a thief taken and punished, and preparations for sailing. So there you go. It preempts you what that chapter is going to be about, and you can then decide, oh, that sounds interesting. I'm going to read on. So, okay. The mutiny on board the HMS Bounty. Now, I know some people have said here, oh, you give spoilers. Okay, if you haven't heard of Mutiny on the Bounty, I really recommend you Google it, because there's going to be tons of content out there about the mutiny. It is so well known. Movies have been made of it. So many books have been written about it. You name it, there is documentaries on it, everything. But this one is his account. William Bligh, the captain of the ship, he basically took a journal, you know, with ink pad and ink, and while he was on an open boat for 41 odd days with 18 other people on board this open boat, he managed to take notes of what they were doing and what they were seeing and how they were coping with being out in the open sea. So the story really is about how William Bligh takes on HMS Bounty, the ship, and he reconfigures it because the Admiralty say to him he has to go to Tahiti on a job, and that job is to get some breadfruit, which was identified as the alternative food source for the slave plantations. Now, I'm not going to talk about that aspect of things. I'm just stating the fact that that was his thing, his task. He had to go over to Tahiti and get some breadfruit, which he did. And while he was going there, he stopped at the different places to look at the various plantations from where he was there last on the third voyage with Captain Cook. So he was on that same voyage as a navigator under training with Captain Cook. And so he visited a lot of the places he had seen before. When he got to Tahiti, they got on well with the Tahitians, because the Tahitians had already known of Captain Cook and had inquired about his whereabouts, and he kept it from them that Captain Cook had died because he was well liked in Tahiti. But anyway, he got the breadfruit. He loads it all on board the Bounty, and this is after 6 months. He tells his crew that they've got to pack up their bongos, get into the ship, and head back to England. But his crew didn't like that idea, simply because after 6 months, as you can understand, they didn't want to go back to England. A lot of them had come from very poor backgrounds, and here they were, had quite settled in Tahiti, warm weather, nice food, great women, you understand. And so what had happened was he forced them back on board, and while they were out at sea, Fletcher Christian got together a group of mutineers, and they managed to boot Bligh into an open boat along with 18 others, and also throw a bit of food out to them, and just bare minimum of essentials, and set him out into the open sea, thinking that they're not going to survive anyway, and that would then buy them some time back in Tahiti to kind of consider what they needed to do. So that's what happened. So we've got a longboat, an open boat, 19 people on board, that then is out into the open sea. Now, it was really interesting to get an understanding of how Bligh managed to save his entire crew on a 41-day journey, 3,500 miles across open sea. They were constantly wet. They had minimal food. They had very little water to drink, and yet he was able to divvy up the rations and get some kind of order happening that allowed for all these men to survive and even reach Batavia in Timor. When he reached Timor, he was then able to recount the story to the governor then, and secure another ship to also take some more breadfruit and get back to England. Only once people got back to England, some of his men had died, simply because of how weak they were with the journey. But it was a real testimony on the guy to really look at how he stayed calm in a very difficult situation and keep his men alive through his excellent leadership and selflessness. So, rightly or wrongly, whether you like the stories of these, I guess, white men who traveled out to different parts of the world, this particular story was simply the story of the mutiny, and that's all I really want to talk about here. I would say it is a very readable book. If you're thinking just because it was written in the 1790s, maybe it's difficult to read. It's not. It's very readable, and I'm really actually quite surprised. It could be written in today, and it would still be very readable. Anyway, so that is it. The Mutiny on board HMS Bounty. A highly recommended read. One that gives you really, I guess, insights into the life of Tahitians back in the 1790s, some of their cultures, also some of the nautical traditions that they had back then. And yeah, a very good book. I really enjoyed this one. Okay, then that's it for me. Bye for now.